I'm the Senior Meteorological Officer at the Sinkismet Services on the SCASPA.
Good afternoon, everybody, to all the listeners for Sugar City FM 90.3 and whatever platform you're listening or viewing from. Welcome. My name is Abdia Samuel. I'm the National Disaster Coordinator for the National Emergency Management Agency, NEMA. It's a pleasure to be here with you.
Almost make me feel like in another COVID 20 this time. Yes, the hurricane season is upon us. And we take it for granted that a lot of persons really understand when the hurricane season starts. But let us just remind them is the effective start of the hurricane season.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Nital. The official start for the hurricane season for the Atlantic Basin is June the 1st and it runs through until November 30th.
Okay, good. Now, with the hurricane, we're on the eve of the hurricane season, the beginning of the hurricane season, maybe 2 days away. Is there a checklist NEMA itself has? Is there a checklist that NEMA has?
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Nittel. So there's a checklist that we have internally for the agency in terms of the responsibility of the state. This checklist takes into consideration our public infrastructure. It takes into consideration our social programs. It also takes into consideration our communications and also our regional and international relationships. And also, the checklist looks at the training procedures that we have undertaken, and also it takes a look at the internal audits of the agency itself being prepared to provide service to the federations once we are under the threat of any hazard, such as cyclonic hazards.
Now, what is the checklist that NEMA constructs for the general public?
Excellent. So the checklist that we encourage for the general public, Nital, is first to have that emergency plan for your household. The emergency plan should include things like one, a meeting place, contact information, knowing where critical facilities are, making sure that you have essential supplies, water, your medication, your dry goods, right? Non-perishable items. So you tick off the list. Do I have some money in place? Yes. Do I have do I know where the evacuation, well, do I know where do we assemble in the event that our home is destroyed? Yes. Is our insurance up to date? Yes. Do I have, if I own vehicles, is the insurance up to date for the vehicle? Do I have the vehicle in a secure location, or do I have a location for the vehicle? Yes or no. So you go along with these ticks. Have I inspected my house for this season? Yes. Do I need to make repairs? When it comes to the family planning and so on, Nital. And then when it comes to for the general public, your workplace, it's important also that you do that checklist in terms of your workplace readiness and so on. So that's the checklist that we have for the general public. Also, it's important communication. Is my cell phone, do I have these essential things? My cell phone, do I have an extra charger, extra batteries? Do I have my searchlight? Do I have essential communication equipment extra? So you have that checklist to build that redundancy for you, that you can be in a survival mode for at least 7 days, independent of the state.
Yes, okay. I believe certain agencies, department, government in general is supposed to work in unison with persons. Because here we're talking about insurance up to date, house insurance very expensive. Do you think it might be wise for persons, for the government, to arrange for persons to get salary advances so that they can at least look after the insurance in particular, which is very much key. We never know what will happen.
So one of the subcommittees that provides that social service on behalf of the state is the Social and Community Development Department. And in our discussions, they do have mechanisms in place to be able to advance those social support, especially the monetary support and other support to persons who are in need of that support. In terms of the salary advancement, my understanding as well is that the government does have that mechanism in place, that if the need arises and the cabinet is advised that they can advance the salary payment before a storm
I
is
suppose you
impending.
ain't governmentable. I wouldn't say bankable, but governmental.
Implementable?
Yeah. That's a light moment.
Yes, sir.
Now, Elmer, back to you.
Okay.
What sort of hurricane season are we expecting? Because we know climate change would have introduced some rise in temperature
Yes.
and the ocean getting very, 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 very hot. As a result of that, what sort of hurricane season should we be anticipating?
Well, for this year, we are anticipating an above average season. And most scientists, especially from all the leading institutions that do seasonal forecasts for the Atlantic hurricane season, they are already suggesting that some have even gone too far as to coin it as potentially a hyperactive season. And just for reference, when we're talking about a season, on average, we usually see about 14 storms developing in the Atlantic basin. Out of these 14 storms, sorry, you usually see about seven developing into hurricanes. And when we talk about hurricanes, we're talking about
Three major ones.
wind speeds of 74 miles per hour and
Mhm.
stronger. And out of those seven, we usually have about three developing into major hurricanes, categories three, four, and five. Unfortunately, for this year, what the climatological models are suggesting and what we are seeing in terms of the signals, as I said, the excessive warm waters along with the transition into a La Nina phase coinciding, especially as we go into the peak season, all of that is hinting towards the above average season. And based on that, the numbers that we're looking at, based on Colorado State University, which is one of the premier institutions that does these outlooks, we are looking at potentially 23 storms. 11 of those may develop into hurricanes, and out of those 11, we may see about five major hurricanes across the Atlantic basin.
Is wind shear associated with the construction of the hurricane season? What impact
Yes.
wind shear would have?
Generally, what we would normally look at, we normally look at what phase of ENSO, which is a global phenomenon. So when we're in a El Nino phase, we usually have strong wind shear across the Atlantic, and wind shear is almost like the enemy for storm formation, because wind shear would tear apart storm formation. However, this year we are looking at the potential transitioning into the summer period where we are going into a La Nina phase. So we're going to have less wind shear. So conditions are going to be favorable for thunderstorm formation and cyclone formation.
Is there any factor for the godly intervention?
Well, I would always say we can pray
You can pray. Fast
and
and pray.
fast and pray.
Maybe you gotta speed up the fast. Gotta be extremely fast and pray just as fast. Yeah, but we understand. Some person usually get mixed up between El Nino and El Nina. We do you can you differentiate one from the other for us?
Yes. Well, El Nino is the abnormal warming of the equatorial eastern Pacific region. And
Mm-hmm.
the net effect for us here in the Atlantic is, as I said earlier, is strong wind shear. So you have a suppression of storm formation generally. On the converse, when we're looking at a La Nina, we're looking at an abnormal cooling of that same equatorial eastern Pacific belt. And the net effect for us here in the Atlantic region is weaker wind shear, which favors the development for cyclones.
Yeah, the la is feminine. I'm not supposed in Spanish. No, no hablo español. Estudio español en la universidad, pero necesito practicar más. So the L is for the
The
male
male,
aspect, la
yes.
niño, and la is for niña.
So in this case, the male is favorable
As
in terms
always.
of
As always. No, we have some community volunteers who try to assist in setting the foundation that we can catapult from. Are those in place as yet? Because one thing I want to stress something. There are some we got to be a little more proactive at times because we can't wait until something happened to somebody to move them. Would NEMA carry out investigation via whichever appropriate stakeholder to ascertain whether somebody would have to move in advance rather than after they would have been impacted?
Yes, thank you for that question, Nital. And yes, we have what we have done in collaboration with a number of social community development officers, health officers, as well as those community workers and volunteers, as you stated. They have done an assessment of these communities, and what we have done is vulnerability mapping of those persons who are vulnerable, right? So we have done that vulnerability persons mapping. So we have mapped where in our community through St. Kitts, we have those groupings, and we have the information of those individuals, and we know who will need to be mobilized. We have also had some strong discussion with uh, the Persons with Disability
Differently
Association.
able, yes. Yeah.
Yeah, the differently abled. We also have had discussions with the Ministry for Persons who
Social
are
welfare.
aging. Yeah,
Mhm.
so we have had some discussion with them as well, and also the Ministry of Health has provided data for us to know those persons that need that assistance. So we know where to mobilize through the community workers in collaboration with those who work for government to mobilize and move those persons from those vulnerable areas who are vulnerable themselves to a much safer area during the potential impact of a storm.
But how often is that database updated? Because then you could have persons who are new to the island and they might not be aware of the shelters. They might. So how often is that database with respect to vulnerable persons updated? Because you might have
Yes.
15, 20 persons being added since the last time the database
Yes.
was
So
updated.
that the social and community development upgrades that data on a monthly basis.
Or something we don't even know who coming. Remember, we are poor as waters.
I agree with
Do you
you.
have field
So
officers to
he,
know
so,
that?
so here's the thing. This is where our community. That's why we have our ears and
Right.
where we have our ears to the ground in the community through our volunteer corps. So they are the ones who are always in the community, and they will report a number of these matters to us.
Very important.
Very important.
Very important. So you take a community to raise a child, but you take a community to take care of adults as well too.
Of course.
Yes. Now, how is NEMA feeling? And I don't want an honest opinion.
Yes.
This time, this year compared to last year, what is the differential? Do you feel like you're right there or we just lagging behind a little bit? Don't be afraid to tell the public. We got
No.
some notches we can go up still.
Yes.
Just
No, here's the thing. I'm happy that we could have this open conversation because a man like you who have that science, and I call you a scientist of many things. And what the challenge we have right now is the human behavior in our community. That's one of the many challenges because we have been trying to change the culture. I don't think that there's that sense of urgency right now in the general public based on the information that we are putting out, based on the engagement and the feedback that we are getting, that there's a sense of urgency because Nital, for the past 40 years, this is one of the worst forecasts that we have seen. And you know that worst forecast that we have seen, and we are saying, people, listen, we're not alarming you. All I want you to do is prepare because St. Kitts and Nevis has not been affected severely by any tropical system like that for the past 15
yes,
years.
that's right.
So therefore, it's gonna be like a new shock.
They will
So
becoming complacent.
complacent. So the complacency is one. Two, uh, um, there are a number of government agencies as well that they are not like putting in that drive.
They're pulling the weight.
Yeah,
Say it easy,
it's-
they're not
it's-
pulling the weight.
right. And we have been working with them because NEMA is short. We only have 14 persons working at NEMA. So therefore, our responsibility is St. Kitts and Nevis, a population over 50 something thousand, and those who are unaccounted for. So therefore, it has to take an all of society approach, and the state is expected to have a level of responsibility when it comes to these kind of situations. And it has to be spread across the public sector. So there are different agencies that have different responsibility, and I don't think that some of them have the urgency, the message of urgency that we have, right, for the general public. So that is the only challenge. But NEMA itself, we are feeling comfortable again, that we can go into the season and be able to provide and meet the mandate that is given to us. Now, the question is, Mr. Nital, is the general public ready to actually partner with the state and provide that shared responsibility to be able to be prepared for and respond to the impacts that may be experienced. Bearing this in mind, and I said it earlier in a radio station, particular radio station, we have too much lessons. We have Ivan 2004, 2005, thereabout. We have Dorian 2019. You saw how the storm just hovered over the Abaco in the Bahamas. We have right there what happened in Antigua and Barbuda, and also what happened in Dominica. So therefore, we now here have to look at those practices and accept the fact that we are in this geographical location, and later we have to prepare. It has to start with the behavioral change too. The funding is a particular challenge. Financing actions for preparedness is something that we have to address, and it's not only about the state, but even the ordinary man on the street. Take a $5 and buy a searchlight. Take a $5, put aside and buy something and prepare yourself for what is to come. That's the challenge. But at the agency, we feel comfortable that we are guiding the process in the right direction.
What about food security, though?
Yes.
Because hurricanes could impact crops. Where do we stand?
Okay.
Suppose a hurricane, God forbid, a hurricane come next week
Yes.
and really cause us to be incapacitated to a great extent with respect to production. Do we have sufficient food to last us for a next year? 6 months? 6 weeks, you just said?
Yeah. I'm gonna.
I know you're not
I-
into agriculture, but
yeah,
I believe they should
no,
have some
no.
interlocking.
They're in the discussion.
Right.
Yeah, they're in the discussion. They're part of the national system. So agriculture has indicated the crops that they have. I know they have install some new, I think, freezers and so on, some new storage capacities that they have had, and that they have explained some of the crops that they have, cultivated. Farmers have brought, and they have certain foods stored for that could take us for a while. But however, Ms. Nital, it's important for the public to know and be reassured that we have had discussion with the food service suppliers and distributors who have indicated that they can take us through the hurricane season safely, meaning that we have food in stock in the federation for the next 6 months.
6 months, that sounds good.
Yes.
Elmer, you ain't gonna spectate enough. You gotta give us a little more insight and let the general public know that this is serious business. I don't know if some distrust would have established along the way, because sometimes we might say rain, then we had all sunshine. You understand? You might not have given any indication that there might be rain, but then you see water coming from the hillside, rushing down the various guts them. How do you explain? How do you say, look, it is not a perfect science,
Yes.
but 95% we are correct.
Yes.
So I listen to you, and I walk with my umbrella. I might have to hide it sometimes. That's a thing, work for the rain, you work for the sun.
That's
So
right, Nital.
help them to get that confidence, because sometimes is a lack of trust and confidence in who delivering the message.
Yes. Well, in relation to weather,
Yes.
because I'm going to start from that time scale. What the general public need to recognize is, as I said, it's not a perfect science. What we do, we look at the conditions in terms of the environmental conditions at the time. We also run some numerical models, and these numerical models are basically some weather models to help guide us, and it's to provide some level of guidance in terms of, based on how the atmosphere was recently, how it is currently, what is it likely to be at a
Projected to be.
particular time. So what we try to do, we give an indication, and that's why we say we give a forecast. We are not giving an exact prediction in terms of, yes, this is going to happen. So we are saying there's a probability or there's a likelihood of something happening. Also, at the same time, what I would want to encourage the general public to be aware of, there are times that we said we are likely to receive rainfall. It may not happen where you are. But in most cases, it happens somewhere within the vicinity, whether it be somewhere in St. Kitts or somewhere in Nevis. And
But
because a lot of
just a
these,
second, you're talking about somewhere in St. Kitts, somewhere in
uh,
Nevis.
mhm,
I used to live Upper College Street, God, and
mhm.
we ain't falling Upper College Street, God, and I'm
And none
falling
down
Lower
low,
College Street,
yeah,
God. So
yes,
it's possible for him those tight areas.
tight
You'll
areas.
witness rainfall one way and not down the other way. Continue.
Yeah.
Sorry for the.
No, because I was going to use a similar analogy like that because even sometimes when you're driving across Old Road Bay, you start, you're going through some heavy showers, midway along the way, it's dry, dry, dry. And then by the time you reach to the end of the Old Road Bay, it's raining, it's pouring again. So there's a level of variability in terms of weather. In relation to our seasonal forecast, because the signals are so strong, we are certain that we're going to be transitioning into a La Nina phase, which is conducive for storm development. We have already seen the abnormal warm waters. A- Actually, the waters are so warm, it's comparable to what we would normally see in the summertime. And persons need to appreciate that it's going to get hotter. So as the atmosphere gets hotter, the ocean itself is gonna get warmer as well, because the ocean is gonna absorb some of that heat. So the ocean temperature is only gonna keep rising. So that ocean heat is the fuel for storm formation. So when you have those two major contributors,
Mhm.
we have a high confidence that we are likely to see an above average season, albeit that we're going to be monitoring in terms of some of the inhibiting factors, such as the Saharan dust. Because, yes, when you have Saharan dust in the intruding in the region, it can inhibit, but the period that we usually see Saharan dust intruding across the Atlantic goes up to at least mid August, thereabout. So you still have the peak of the hurricane season to contend with when you have a reduction in Saharan dust intruding into our region and go straight into October and November period as well.
And we have some manifestation of the warmth of the ocean because we have whales and sharks being coming ashore. If you follow the
Yes.
news,
Mhm.
you will see all of that. A sighting was of a
Over,
whale, a shark
A shark.
over
over
shipwreck.
Shipwreck.
over shipwreck.
Yes,
Yes.
yes.
We saw one, but whether
Mhm.
or not we saw 1 out of 10 or 1 out of 1, we don't know. So that is good manifestation. What warning you have for those persons who survive by marine life, fishing and that sort of stuff, and don't want to take heed? It's like nobody could tell them what to do. They have calculated the risk, or so they think, and they take the risk. What is in place to really convince these people that they must go by the messages that were broadcast?
In terms of from a weather perspective, we do recognize that meteorology is an evolving science. It is a relatively new science. We do monitor in terms of the sea conditions as well as the general atmospheric conditions, and it's important for seafarers to understand that when we're trying to put out our forecast, we're trying to put out for you to have some kind of guidance in terms of what type of conditions you can expect when you're out there. In terms of it from a climatology point of view, because rightfully you indicated in terms of the warming of the waters, and persons now need to recognize that we're going to see a shift in terms of what type of fish is available to us. And it's just the reality. That's the reality climate change is forcing on us. Because we're now going to see warmer waters well north of us. You're going to have a lot of migration of a lot of these tropical fish. So this is something that agriculture, marine, and all those departments would have to pay attention, because it's going to affect the fish population here in the Caribbean.
And it's going to
And
impact the feeding grounds.
yes,
And sometimes a fish might not be generally poisonous, so to speak, but then because of what it is now feeding on, it creates a problem for human consumption.
Mhm.
So is there some collaboration between NEMA and the fisheries complex to say, look, during the hurricane season, could you be a little more vigilant and send out more warning to persons that, look, be careful with the type of fish you eat, or be careful with the I do not like to eat too much of one thing. I always
Yeah.
assume something wrong with it, so I just eat insufficient. No, I just eat
Yeah.
insufficient to stay
To move
safe.
up.
They
Okay.
say,
Yeah, I have gone to minor quantities. Because you never know. A lot of things changing up. We're
yes.
going into desalination, the same thing, the feeding ground might change up again and decide to feed other places, presenting a potential problem for fish consumers.
Yes, so we do have, Nital, good relationship with Ministry of Agriculture and Marine and the Marine Division. So they do provide, we do have consultations. When we see these shark sightings, we do have conversations with them because you know that our major asset for our tourism product that drives our economy is our beaches, is our major national assets. And when we see these things, we reach out to them, we have discussions with them, we extend the discussions with the fisher folks because they are a part of the whole process, not only because of their practice, but also because we need their services, if necessary, to carry out evacuations, to help us with evacuation, rescue operations, and so on. In terms of their personal safety, I know that they have been taking some proactive approach. They would have had some radio trainings with them to make sure that they are communicated in terms of the climate impact that's going to be facing that particular sector. This is where we need to know, get a little more, let me say the word, aggressive, so that we can actually have the fishermen understand the impact we're going to have, not short term, but long term, as Elmo said, with the migration of the fishes that we are accustomed to around here. And eventually, from what reports we have received, you're finding fishermen are now having to go further and further and sometimes venture into other fishing grounds,
Illegal
right?
waters.
Illegal
Hmm.
waters, in order for them to make their, exercise their craft to make a living. So we now need to look at that in its entirety with our partners and see how best we can mitigate against that. But we do have that connectivity. We do have that discussions with the Marine Division for the Agriculture Department, Ministry of Agriculture, to address those concerns.
What is the proficiency of communication with persons stranded at sea? Because we have a situation here where you could well be in our waters,
Yes.
but yet the signal would have to go to Guadeloupe before they relay it back to us.
To
What
us.
is that? It is very confusing for locals to understand.
Um, what from my understanding now, there has been significant improvement in terms of the marine channels where persons can, what is encouraged to these mariners when they're leaving from one port to the next is to make sure that there's that communication between the ports, that they can also communicate with the ports that they are going to be going to, in terms of the channels. But I think that in itself, Natal has been improved significantly, whereby persons can have direct communication with us. What happened sometime, and last year that it was an experience where a particular vessel left Antigua illegally, and it was a cruise ship that was in our area was able to pick up on that based on the marine communication that was the SOS that was put out, and then they were able to relay that information to St. Kitts and Nevis, and that's why our Coast Guard was deployed to the particular area. So the marine communication, in my understanding, has improved significantly. Where the nearest port can be contacted and assistance deployed.
Okay. Now, what sort of grace period do we have between nothing seemingly happening
Yes.
and something major happening? And I'm saying that because if we have what, 11 miles,
Yes.
it's Bastia to Nevis, and a boat might have left to come into Bastia Harbor. Could something drastically happen in that 45 minutes or 30 minutes before we could get, maybe even give a warning before it initiated? Is there that possibility? What the science is telling us about that? Could you say, look, see, hustler, do not leave Nevis.
Mhm.
Even though we don't have
Yeah.
something immediately, it is pending and it could happen within the next 30. Do we have that kind of capacity?
Well, at this moment, the capacity that we have, we can give several hours advance notice. And because a lot of the features that we monitor are not minute by minute. Yes, they evolve in terms of minute by minute. However, in terms of development, you usually can actually model them and monitor them over a longer time frame rather than just a few minutes. And that's why it's very important, as I said, for us to provide continuous update. We at the Met Office, we monitor a lot of these weather features, and as we see changes, because as I said earlier, it's not a perfect science. Weather is dynamic in nature. So as we see these changes happening, we would issue the necessary alerts and advisories accordingly.
There's something called extrapolation.
Mhm,
You give them the facts,
mhm.
but then based on the trajectory, you could extrapolate, look, it's going to go that way instead of that way. We have the capacity to extrapolate. I think
Yes,
that you were just
yes, we
saying
do. Yes, we
in.
do. We do
Mm-hmm,
have that level of capacity to extrapolate, as I said.
mm-hmm.
However, although you may extrapolate based on the initial time, conditions would change along the way. So as conditions change, we reassess the situation and do a next extrapolation.
My name is just over there from saying we got all that. We got
Yes.
all
Huh?
that.
Yeah.
No,
I
for
talking about
example,
boat coming from
no,
St.
for ex-
Martin.
yes, cause Nital, I remember
Yeah.
there was a scenario where we were monitoring some severe weather that was approaching the island chain,
Mhm.
and it was just off Antigua, and Antigua is just 50 miles thereabout from us. So it was some significant weather approaching us. So we started issuing the alerts and the advisories and so forth. However, everything stalled just before it reached Nevis. And persons bashed us. My back is broad, little to say. And I informed the general public, yes, it's not that we got it wrong, but based on what we saw at the time and how it was progressing, the likelihood of it impacting us at a particular time was at this level, and as such, it was imperative on us to give you that alert. So at times it will shift accordingly, and as such, we would have to shift our messaging accordingly. So bear with us. Um, that's why we come to you. Some persons at times will say, "Wait, well, they keep hearing us. They keep hearing Mr. Samuel." It's not that we want to be in your face at all the time, but it's important for us to monitor the changes and relay the information to you, the general public, so you could take the necessary action.
Is there a way to do notification? Can can somebody like me? I just added 466 5300 as a
5100.
what's
5100. Yeah. What's up?
5100, and I got accepted there
Yeah.
by the WhatsApp. Some persons must maybe not recognize it as a WhatsApp number
Yeah.
because usually you don't have 466
36. Yeah.
WhatsApp. So I don't know if you want to put a little thing on that to let people. Is there a notification? Is there
Yeah.
somewhere that since I have that number, I could be notified
Yes.
maybe better than somebody who doesn't have access to that WhatsApp number?
Well, Little, the thing is that we have built redundancy in our notification and alerting mechanism. Okay, we have built relationships with all the radio stations. We are in the process of installing emergency broadcast interruption systems. We already have that. We are in discussions with the many radio stations. We are hoping to get that implemented soonest. We are working on first having the MOUs established. We are in discussions with NTRC. We already identified the technician to go around, and we're going to visit the various radio stations, have that discussion. That is going to be one way. The second thing is using social media platforms. So at NEMA, we have Facebook pages. We have the WhatsApp blast, like you just said, and thank you for joining. And I hope that your followers and listeners will follow you.
I'll be pushing
Yeah,
it.
yeah, because Miss Brian has been doing a wonderful job in strategizing in building it. We have gone from just having 200 persons on it in a population of almost over 40 something thousand. We are up to maybe at over a couple thousands. We want to get it to at least 35,000 people so that once we put out that information, it goes to all. Thirdly, we have the relationship with the service providers, Digicel and Flow. We send the information to them and they will blast it out. We tested that during the Caribbean Wave exercise, where you would have seen the Caribbean Wave messaging and alerts that would have come through via SMS messages. And they have also pledged to support using the social media platforms. We also have Twitter. which is now X. We are also on TikTok. We are also on Instagram to ensure that we reach that demographic group of young
Young
people,
people.
right? So that they can help us with the messaging as well. There's a chat that the OECS also started. We are also a part of that, so that we can actually send message, and it's a youth chat, right? Where you actually blast information and so on. So those are the main ways. Well, of course, we have the traditional, we send things to ZIZ, the state television. The cable assist us also by scrolling. When we need them, they will scroll on CNN. It's limited to CNN, and they will also use their social media platforms. So what we are doing is, these service providers that have a lot of people on the platforms, we have built relationship in that interconnectivity with them, that once we share anything with them, then they put it on their platforms to have that deeper penetration than just NEMA alone. So we have that. Also SKNIS, we try to use the government service, which is SKNIS, to help us blast. Tomorrow I should be meeting with a number of the media houses to see how I could bring them on board, and they can help us get the messages out to the public.
I think between the lines, I would have understood you to say,
Yes.
if I'm having fear now favor, like tonight,
Yes.
and there's an emergency, is there a built-in system to just interrupt my thing and bring it
And
in
bring it in.
automatically?
Automatically.
Because I think one time there was a simulation. Jackie was having a morning show,
Sure.
and you just heard a
Yeah.
message came to from NEMA.
NEMA, right.
And is it automatic that regardless of what you're having, all radio stations
Yeah.
would have signed on to it and it just interrupt and
Interrupt.
give it priority?
Give it priority. Just like in the United States,
Mhm.
that's what we want to do. So even while we're here discussing, something happened,
Just
it's just
override,
overrides,
supersede.
and it goes straight, gives the
Excellent.
message.
Is it all built out as yet? Or
We
you're still in the
we have
process
the
of doing it?
process. We have the equipment already, so it's just to have those agreements with the radio stations, because it's going to require, for example, they must have internet. The internet speed has to be fiber connectivity, right? So all those who have fiber to their place, and if they don't, I see Nital kind of getting
Now
sitting
you say
back.
fiber, I want
Yeah.
to come back to that.
Right.
Fiber
Yeah,
connectivity.
if they don't, then what we want to see is, how do we partner with either the cable or flow to support that radio station, so that we can get fiber to that radio station and have them on board with that system, because we need all radio station on board. We don't want any to be left behind, right? We need everybody on board.
With
Yes.
fiber optic.
Yes.
That means that landlines, telephone landlines dead if there's no electricity, because they're now plugging up to the
Modern.
modem.
Right.
How can we mitigate that? Because if you got people who are differently able and they're
Yes.
already programmed to do what they're supposed to
To
do.
do. Right.
So how do we mitigate that? That without electricity, the modem cannot work. A
Yes.
landline, you could have just plug it in and you make
And-
call. Carola, you okay?
Yeah.
Yes, this, that. Any, how, what is, it's a very delicate equilibrium to establish.
Of course.
What are we trying to do to override that? What can be done?
Well,
Electricity department and
I'm gonna have to get back to you on that one, because the reality is that discussion is ongoing. The Digicel, the cable, and Flow, they sit around the table with us. They form part of the Utilities National Subcommittee, and this is an ongoing discussion, because fiber to the home is to increase the connectivity to be able to have that option of having a better experience. Now the question is, what are the fallouts from that? I'm hopeful that they are listening and they could call in and help me out here, right? Because the reality is, it's a serious concern. Okay, yeah, I have people who are calling me directly, right? Asking me, well, Mr. Samuel, how are we going to go through this storm? How are we going to go through the season with this connectivity? They're asking me whether they should go fiber or they should leave the old telephone system. And so Digicel and Flow and the cable, they need to do, they're going to have to do some strong public awareness campaign as to why and why the whys, the importance, as well as the disadvantages of some of these technological advances. It will be very
but it
important.
cannot coexist. Cannot coexist. Who want to say plugging up, say plug up, and who
Yeah.
want to be a part of the
Yeah.
Wi-Fi
Yes.
system? I don't know. They could explore coexistence.
Right.
But given that, and hopefully it will progress to something that is doable.
Yes.
What about the radio handset club that
Yeah.
just work with battery?
Yeah.
What are they an integral part of NEMA's efforts?
Of course, we have a very strong relationship with the Amateur Radio Society.
Yes.
They actually operate they are responsible once we activate the National Emergency Operations Center. They are the stakeholders who will take responsibility in managing the radio communications. Those the two-way radio, right? The high frequency, the HF, the VHF, and so on. They are responsible. They actually, have they have an agreement with us, and they operate on that national level. Um, in Dominica in 2017, when every infrastructure was down, ham radio is what kept them communicated globally, not just regionally and nationally, but globally. So that is our redundancy in the event that everything goes down. We are also looking at, because as I said in the other radio stations, and I will say it here as well, because it's a common, people will get angrier with us or with you if they don't have connectivity as opposed to food. They could overlook the food, but connectivity is the thing. Somebody who's not connected. So we are having discussions through CDMO with Starlink to also help us stay connected after a major devastation. So if we are devastated, we want them to come in for a particular period of time that the NTRC approves. And once they come in, they provide a service. Once we finish with them, and everything is restored, then we can have them leave our space until the licenses and whatever agreements are given again.
Yeah, there's a possibility that things can happen.
Yes.
Of course, we're hoping for the best, but we're preparing for the worst.
Yes.
And sometimes you have persons from neighboring islands coming here to assist us to expedite the recovery process. What sort of insurance do we have in place for persons who are just visiting? Do you have a special arrangement to keep them covered? What is what?
Well, first we once anybody, any human being or animals, because we have to include the animal,
Mhm.
once they are on our shores and we're impacted, all courtesies extended by the state to its own citizens and residents is extended to everybody who is residing here. What we have in place is that we have understanding agreements, MOUs with many nations through their embassies and their missions throughout the Caribbean. For example, we have a very strong relationship with the U.S. Embassy in Barbados. So they actually come and visit, and I meet with them, and we discuss a number of matters in terms of their citizens, technical assistance, what they can do, where we can source certain assistance from them and resources. So we have those very strong discussions with them because of their interest. Also, the UK High Commission, they come in, they do have the same similar discussions. Canadians as well. So we have that level of, so to speak, that's the insurance that we have for them, that if anything happens, we reach out to their embassies, we reach out to their missions through our foreign assistance committee to provide them. But locally, they will be able to access all of our social services because of the special circumstances at the time, right? To
That's
support them.
international. Do we have
That's
regional? We have regional
Yes, regional
agreements.
of course. So
Mhm.
with the regional agreements, with CDMA
Mhm.
have the regional response mechanism.
Mhm.
And what they already have indicated to us that their state of readiness to support St. Kitts and Nevis and their member states as well. We also have strong relationship with the OECS, who also has that level of capacity to provide support. But CDMO actually brings together all of the CARICOM branches to be able to provide us with that support. So through CDMO, we mobilize all of that. No, we asked a strong question of CARICOM when we met. We have the Technical Advisory Committee, which is all the national disaster coordinators from the 19 CDMA member states. How does the free movement for CARICOM now impacts this? Because here's the challenge. Climate change is going to actually impact migration of people throughout the Caribbean. And we have to prepare for that as well, Nital.
Yes,
It's
of
not just the
course.
hurricane season. And we have had the experience. Look what happened in Haiti, look what happened in Venezuela, and there was that strong migration. It's going to reach the point where we're going to have to look at our own brothers and sisters in the either OECS or the wider CARICOM region, that climate change or as a result of major hurricanes. And that was evident in 2017. They have Dominicans who are still living in St. Kitts or Nevis
Relocation.
from there. They relocated as a result of the impact of Irma and Maria, right? So we have to also look at that.
NEMA has a boat. Suppose you had to do rescue at sea, who do you call on?
Uh,
And I'm saying
yeah,
that because I
yes,
want to ask this before.
sure.
If you have persons who you want not to go out to sea and they decided that they're going, is there a legal way of creating an injunction on those persons so that they do not go and complicate the task for the first responders? Could we do anything or just ethical? You either encourage them to go, and if they go, that's a business, you can't stop them.
Well, like
What
every
is the law with
well,
respect to that?
with everything, well, my understanding is two things. The Marine Division has some level of restrictive movement. My
Hmm.
understanding, I can't quote you the exact law. My understanding is the Coast Guard as well. They too can implement a number of things. And my understanding as well is that the port authorities, which is in this case CASPA, CASPA can go to certain limits when it comes to port of entries into the Federation. They too can take certain actions, but it's mainly the Coast Guard, my understanding, can take those major actions. Also, what you call that particular this there's this department, marine, uh, not marine resources, maritime affairs. I
Hmm.
understand that maritime affairs as well. Maritime affairs do have some level of control as well in terms of that. That's my understanding. But if NEMA wants to have some level of control of persons that are going out, we don't have that law within our scope of practice. In our previous discussions about that during COVID, we were informed that in order to restrict those movements, we then have to institute a state of emergency, which will then restrict or take away all your civil liberties, so to speak, and then we will have control over that. But in my discussion with the commander and others, that movement in terms of people, because the reality is,
How quickly can that be done?
and that's the other thing, because he has to a state of emergency, you have to go parliament and
Right.
do all of that, etc., to and do the statutory rules and all the SRNOs to actually enforce that state of emergency, because it has to come with a number of stipulations. So this is where, but what I will do, I have to get back to the commander and others and maritime affairs about that, because we had an incident. I'm happy earlier I was going to make an intervention, but we had an incident where a marine forecast was issued, an advisory were issued for the seafarers, and a particular service providers decide that they're not adhering to it. And then they can, while everybody else was harbored, right? I was told that they actually attempted to continue to move, right? And in the movement, my understanding was that persons were compromised because they had a failure. So that leads up to, I wonder if that was the backdrop of your question um, earlier, because that happened. It actually happened. And I remember reaching out to a number of the government and say, listen, we need to do some further regulating on this. That if an advisory goes out, it doesn't matter if you don't see this great impact, step out and allow the authorities to come back and say, okay, there's an
It's all
all clear,
clear.
and then you begin, because what could have happened there is we could have a catastrophic event again.
And you could have said like a 1 year already, and
Yeah,
you're still gone.
it's
Would
still
it be
gone.
unethical or illegal for you to ignore these
Exactly.
people?
And
But did
that's the
I
point.
speak to Nemo with
Yeah,
respect to that?
yeah, but he's
Would it be unethical or would it be illegal for you to? Can you be taken to court and be sued because you deliberately ignore them because they didn't heed your warning?
well, no, I don't. In my law, for now, it's an unethical,
Unethical,
unethical.
not
I am
unlawful.
not unlawful because our law does not speak to it. That's the challenge, right? So we do have, Nital, I must say, We everything is a work in progress, and we do have some consultants who are going to come in and work on that. But I do know that maritime affairs as well as Coast Guard has some capacity to implement a number of these things.
For years now, we have been looking at those persons residing on the southern side of the main road going past Old Road.
Yes.
And given the fact that we are anticipating a quite hyperactive hurricane season, what extra effort was made to convince these people and the government and lawmakers that we got to get these people moved? Just like how the government could just take your land, which interests the general public, can't they force them to move and relocate them? Because, I mean, we're hearing this thing for 10, 15, 20 years. And with this such a hyperactive season, to me, it seems like somebody dropping the ball. Mind them, I get a second grasp at it. You know, when a ball hits you in your chest, you dive and you hold it. But who to blame for this? These people still on the southern side of the island main road as we go through. Who really to blame? Who dropping the ball?
And I'm going to take a bite at this, Nital. We're having a good conversation. My understanding, I was presented with some historical facts when I became the head of NEMA, that the government had taken a position to relocate those same individuals some time back, and they would have given them land above the half tree, above the line, as we just say,
Sighting it. Mhm.
above the line, to give them some, flexibility to be away from the coastline. My understanding is that while persons were relocated and they were given a program, persons still went back to their original locations, and there was no enforcement then to ensure that that didn't happen. Right? That was presented to me, and of course, there could be many factors that would affect that. One being probably the political factor, okay? One being the traditional practice of
Sentimental
and the
values.
sentimental values,
Mm-hmm.
right? So I think couple all those things coupled together may have impacted the way in which the state may have responded then to that particular situation. But it's a serious situation. But Nital, I want to put back a question to you now: is how are we going to going forward? How are we going to address this issue? Because the the terrain and the topography of St. Kitts and Nevis
Mm-hmm.
is of such that our mountainous areas is in the center,
And the
is not
coastlines are a
spaced
bit
out, and
closer.
the coastline is
So
our flat area where development will take place. I mean, are we saying that we should go up in the
we
mountain now
have
for
to go up
development?
more. We have to go up more.
Right?
We got to spend some money and go up
But
more.
here's this: we are a tourism-based economy.
Mm-hmm.
Most tourists are coming, and when I had this debate with a consultant that was here last week, most tourists are coming to go to the
How
beach,
the shoreline.
the
Mm-hmm.
shoreline. They don't want a long distance walk because in the States, everything for them is far away. They want to be able to come out that. And bearing in mind this, that we are now in a competitive market, an extremely competitive tourism market, right? With the Jamaicas, the Dominican Republic, who is becoming the small Dubai of the Caribbean,
Mm-hmm.
Punta Cana. How do we now compete with these destinations if we start to go up into the mountain and abandon our coastline as
But we
development?
take tourism products. We have new tourism products and put them at a higher altitude. Is where you put them in, and the tourists can go where nothing is.
Yeah.
Once you put them somewhere else, as a matter of fact, if the government swap land to relocate you, the
Yeah.
land that you were at before, that now become government
Yeah,
land, that
come
mean
yeah,
you'll be
Crown Land. Yeah.
trespassing.
Yes.
I mean, you'll be trespassing. Sometimes you got to lose a few friends.
Yes.
Some people might not like decisions you make, but after a while, they will really dig deep and say, well, it was better decision.
Great.
We
Great.
can't wait until a major incident take place. I mean, something could happen this time around.
Yes.
Hyper, you said 25 and then 14, and out the 14, you might got seven major one. And when
Yeah.
you say major, you mean chief 4 or 5, right?
Yes.
Right. So somebody got to be more authoritative in every democracy. I feel there's supposed to be some degree of dictatorship.
Okay.
You have, if you cannot dictate in a democracy, you're a weak leader. Because ain't everybody gonna put up their hand and 50 out of 50, no. Maybe you get 30 out of 50. But the
Yes.
20 you lose, the 10 of them would come back. You'll
Right.
bring up your 40. So we We got to be tight on. What about transportation?
Right.
Because I realize that we got guts all over St. Kitts, got one way.
Yeah.
The transportation that NEMA would have designated and the drivers, where the drivers live relative to the source of the transportation.
Okay.
What is the effort being made to make sure who's supposed to be driving bus A is close to bus A? Unless he in town and he driving bus A in Sandy Point and he can't pass the road.
Right. Excellent question. So there's a strategy by our National Transportation Subcommittee.
Yes.
So what we do is that we pool all of government's vehicle, and there are also contractual agreements with private sector providers or private providers. So what we do is that we pool all the government vehicles, and most of these vehicles are parked and stationed at the Springfield camp. What we have decided now, with the leadership of Mr. Darrell Lloyd, who is the responsible for that, is that they came up with a strategy now to have them strategically placed around the island, just like we strategically place heavy equipment around the island. And what they have also done in addition to that, to support that, is to have the drivers of those vehicles assigned to the areas where they are from. So therefore, if I cannot get a driver for the, let me say, the school bus to come to Bastia because, as I said, the gut's running, he's already in Sandy Point, so he could provide a service for that area that he's from. So that has been done. That is in place. As a matter of fact, I just last week I received the plan, meaning all the list of vehicles, the list of drivers, and which areas they will be responsible for. So that is already in place. So it's just for once we get a notification, Mr. Nital, we will then have these vehicles strategically placed around police stations around the island where persons can actually go. The drivers will go collect those vehicles and function where they are instructed.
So we're here today.
Yes.
How we can within focus, which focus to the best of our ability.
Yes.
But Hurricane reached last night, right? Tonight.
Yes.
It comes tonight. Those vehicles, they have fuel inside of them.
Of course. When you're handing over a vehicle for emergency purpose of ours, all heads of department and permanent secretaries have been informed to hand them over filled with gasoline.
If you go examine 20 of them,
Well,
you got at least 8 of them
yes.
would not have been sufficient fuel to do what they're supposed to do. Money is a problem right now, and we need to prioritize the emergency transportation.
Yes.
But I know that some of them, 8 out of 20, that's about 40%, would not have the required fuel inside of it to do what they're supposed to do.
So here's where we have that relation with the fueling station at Public Works, where we will just go there and we have that agreement with them. We will fuel those vehicles and have those vehicles ready. Payment will come. They know that government will pay
There's
them.
only one public works in town. You know, you got public works
Yeah,
in
but
Sandy Point.
we have a but we have a priority. We have a priority, and what we are now in consultation with them is, we could actually we have been given, we have that particular flexibility where we can contract services of private service providers. So I could use that gas station in Sandy Point, and we could tell them, okay, send them that letter of agreement. And with that, we can send the vehicle operators there to fill up the vehicle. So we have that.
You got a good credit history down
Of
there?
course, definitely.
Credit history is key. Credit history is... Let's talk about the shelters.
Yes.
It is my understanding that they have not finalized
a list
of the shelters for this season. This is the eve of the season. When could people expect to get that finalized listing?
Okay, a wonderful question. So here's where, again, I'm going to appeal to the communities in particular. So it's not that we don't have emergency shelters ready. They are under review. Okay, so what exists now is the list from last year. Okay, so the list from last year is still active, present.
But some
of those
might not be in position to accommodate anybody.
Agreed with you. So here's where I was making my appeal, Nitan. For example, we have some of these community centers that we use as emergency shelters. So last year we would have spent hundreds of thousands of dollars repairing those. And then guess what happened? fellas, young, people, let me say just people, vandalize, throw stones, mash up the windows. So what happening right now is that we're making sure that these windows are being repaired, and with the demands on public works and others, of course, they are prioritizing those emergency shelters as we speak, so that before we go into that peak of the season, before we go into that, uh, how am I put it to you?
But we don't know where the peak is.
We do know
The
where the
peak
peak is,
could the peak could be,
but
it could shift.
I,
Climate
I,
change could shift it to
I,
the first
yeah,
10 days in
I agree
June.
with you, but I could assure you that we will have space because we're not only focusing on those shelters. The Prime Minister has indicated that we are going to also have schools as shelters as a last resort. Hear me go.
Because people going there don't want to come
Don't
out.
want to come out as a last resort. And we saw that in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. So that's why St. Kitts has that policy. But it will be the last resort. We're also encouraging the body system, whereby if your house is stronger than mine, man, help your neighbor or help your family and let us stay with you at least for that short period. Three, we are developing relationships with the hotels and the room stock so that we could have access to those. Four, we also have a listing of service providers, those persons who provide those services in Natal. So that, for example, if you lease a house, if you don't rent a house, what we're going to do is be able to contract your services to rent your house for a particular period, a short period, to provide shelters. So we are looking at all those different multidimensional approaches
Mhm.
to be able to have a proper, adequate stock. Because as it is right now, we don't have the adequate percentage to be able to shelter our
But
population, and nobody has.
where are we behind? Where are we behind with the shelters? Then? The review was delayed.
No,
What happened?
it
How
was,
come at this state right now you couldn't show me a list?
right.
This is the oldest. We doubtful of that, but we don't add on four more.
And I'm gonna put it to you again. The problem is the shelters are community centers and public buildings, most of them. Okay, and these buildings are not just there closed for emergency shelters; they are being used for other community activities. And what happened it is that with the usage, some people just vandalize, they damage. And I am not going to feel comfortable putting people in an area that is not environmentally friendly and
Compromise.
habitable for anybody. You won't want it for you. I won't want it for me. So I'm not giving it to anybody. So unless that happens, the committee is not going to certify that area. So that space. So if I have to take it off the list to make some repairs and make sure that we get the repairs done in time, yeah, then we're doing so. The team started since February getting all these repairs done. Okay, so I might have budgeted to fix the roof this year. But when you look in February, fellas vandalize that thing so much. So no, that's not budgeted for. We don't have to know priorities. Where do we get these budgets to support fixing all those windows, fixing the drainage which is the damage, fixing the bathroom? Sometimes you see fellas smash the bathrooms and the toilets,
A
and
big stone
people,
outside
yeah,
there, they
yeah,
keep all
people,
of them.
damage the toilets. Sometimes people even steal these things.
So where is
Right?
education? Education doesn't mean if you CSEC and CAPE and degree. Where's the education? Where's the community education? To implore,
Yes.
beseech these people in the community to look. You got a responsibility to help
Yeah.
us to maintain these
Yes.
facilities. Do we have persons who go out there and put that education in their head for them to understand? If we mess up these stuff, we could be interfering with security of
Yeah.
my family or my
Of
close
course.
friend, my neighbor.
So that's why our district volunteers, they have been doing that. We
Okay.
have been we're working with Red Cross as well to help us in that
Mm-hmm.
regard.
Mm-hmm.
Elmo is one of the big boys from the Red Cross, so they
Okay.
know, right? So the messaging has been out there. The problem is,
Okay.
Nital, as I said to you earlier, is how do we get that behavioral change, that
Change
patriotic
mindset.
spirit, and change those mindsets? That why take up a stone and mash up a window just to hear glass break? You understand? Because you might be the one who need the shelter, and then but you go there. If you go start to get wet, you say, "Well, NEMA put me in a place where I'm getting wet."
But what are we doing with the mental health? You got persons on the road that are mentally challenged
Yes,
and they do quite a bit of this vandalism.
yes.
What are we doing to work in unison with the appropriate authorities to avoid things like that happening?
So the Ministry of Health, Social and Community Development, they have been working with the relevant agencies. I know there is the I think is the Psychosocial and Mental Health Association. I'm
Mhm.
understanding that that is being revived
Mhm.
so that we can address these things. I know there was a nurse, Isaac. I'm told that she's not. She was very good during COVID. That lady we had briefing
From
with her.
K on.
Yeah, she was good. She will go out there and she will tell you by name, and when she speak to them, she gets them off the street. So during we
Besides that,
yeah,
that's
Miss
very good.
Isaac, she was awesome. My understanding is that there's somebody else now who's dealing with that. So we that
Is it Miss Coffee?
I think I don't remember the
Yeah.
lady
Okay.
name,
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, she's also dealing with that. I've had some conversations with them in terms of that situation because when we are preparing, we cannot just prepare for you who good or whoever. They are part of the process. So we got to know where we gonna put them, how we're gonna deal with them because sometimes they call family. I've learned so much, Nital. I didn't even know some of them when they call the family
Yeah, I'm
family.
saying.
I couldn't believe, right? So
Yeah, I'm saying.
yeah, so we have that connectivity to make sure we address that. The problem is children. I saw myself in the St. Johnson area going home one time where a child was throwing stones into the community center and I had to jump out of the vehicle and try to talk to him and I almost get some stone myself. Nital. So the question is, how do we continue to work with Ministry of Education, work with the parents, work with the communities to educate these children not to vandalize these buildings, right? So this is a challenge.
Anything you're trying to achieve before the hurricane season, just today's time, that you're falling short of, regrettably so?
Yes.
Is there anything you have highly prioritized, but you just can't get it complete?
Yes, Nital. And you know what that is? Getting the general public and those persons in the community who have some influence
Mm-hmm.
involved in the process, getting them somewhat on board and the train to preparedness. Because you see, one of the major challenges that we have is misinformation, disinformation, sensationalization of information, whereby Nital sometimes the forecast from the National Hurricane Center
Mm-hmm.
is a wide. Elmo has to then wait until it goes to Antigua. Antigua breaks it down, and then Elmo now breaks it down further for us here locally. People get that and they start to sensationalize. And then you have these behaviors and reaction. As you said, it bring a level of distrust
Mm-hmm.
because people sometimes, no matter how much we educate them, they don't go through the process and or understand the process. And I was hoping that Elmo will touch base on that as well.
Yeah, I
You're
have
coming
that
to him,
coming up.
right?
Yes.
Yeah, come because it's important because Nital, you see, the problem with that is that people say, "But Samuel, why are you so late? Why are you so late?" And as Elmo said, sometimes you have to go through the public scrutiny, but the public needs to understand there is a process. I to the come down and Elmo say, "Well, Elmo, my colleague in Antigua don't come and tell me this is going on." Yeah. Elmo will say, "Samuel, just a minute. We actually doing the process now. Here we're breaking it down. I will be with you shortly." I have to wait for that, Nital, in order to then trigger certain actions. Because then if I take the forecast in Antigua, then I could trigger the wrong actions here and think it's an Nevis.
So, is there a site where people should and ought to resort to that for the proper information?
Wonderful
And
question.
is there a criminal offense, so to speak, if somebody goes and put the wrong information out to the public's domain? Because we have the Unlawful Communication Act,
Ah, mhm.
and if you want to do that and disrupt and create panic in a whole country, are we covered by that? NEMA has the coverage, the
Well,
supporting law for them kind of
you
things.
quoted the law. It's not under NEMA, but you quoted the law. And the question will be for the prosecutor's office to say, or the AG's chamber to indicate whether we can go at that. Because if significant harm is caused as a result of Nital saying A,
Mm-hmm.
Nital should be held responsible.
Held,
It
held
happened
responsible.
in Nicaragua. The National Disaster Coordinator was incarcerated because he did not warn and give the warning in the time frame which he should have for
Mm-hmm.
the volcano eruption, right? So the question is, Nathan, again, at what point we're gonna have to start to use the law to address a number of these concerns or enhance the law for NEMA so that once we activate and we go into that state of emergency, well, not a state of emergency, but crisis,
Mm-hmm.
that NEMA has this regulation to be able to curve a
Mm-hmm.
number of these unethical behaviors.
We have to admit that politics has polarized our country. Ain't no maybe about that. No offense there for nobody to sit on. You either are or perceive to
To
be.
be.
And some people feel like causing problems will make the current administration look bad. But sometimes it goes beyond that. It goes way beyond that, and we have to let our people know you're not impacting the prime minister. You wasn't impacting the one who gone before either. You're impacting your fellow community
Community.
members.
That's the thing.
So Elmo, you chip in on this
Yeah.
because you need to come on later, because if you stay too long, if you
Yes.
stay too long to get it one, you better got a medical certificate to say you couldn't come out soonest.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, go
Well,
ahead.
thanks for that, Little. As I said earlier, what we do collaboratively, we have discussions with the National Hurricane Center. So the National Hurricane Center will do it on a, as Mr. Samuel indicated, on a wide scale projection in terms of conditions across the entire basin or sometimes in the sub-region. And then
National Hurricane Center,
that's
where
NOAA.
that is.
It's based in Miami.
Yeah,
That's the
because when you
office.
say national, people don't say, but you got it here and you're playing the football,
No,
you
no,
got
no,
it
no,
there.
no, 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 no.
Yeah,
So
okay,
that
we
is based in
understand. Right,
yes. So that is
okay.
based in Miami.
Okay.
So they have the responsibility to monitor cyclone development for the
Mm-hmm.
Atlantic Basin, and that is one of the WMO agreement, the World Meteorological Agreement. Um, so after they do it on the large scale, Antigua, who is responsible for the northern Leeward Island, the sub-region, inclusive of Antigua Barbuda, Cinque and Nevis, Tortola, Montserrat, and the BVI. They have responsibility for those five islands in terms of issuing watches and warnings in consultation with the local Met Office. I would say, luckily for us here in St. Kitts and Nevis, we do have that level of competency to lend support to that process. So
Mm-hmm.
whenever Antigua and Barbuda do that regional approach, instead of us saying conditions across the region, what we try to now do is try to localize it as much as possible in a short time frame as possible.
Mm-hmm.
Because we do recognize that we are competing against a lot of persons in terms of social media followers of those influencers.
Mm-hmm.
So we try to get as accurate information as possible based on what we have at the time out in as quick time as possible so that persons could take the necessary action. What I wanted to add as well, because you would have spoke about in terms of media, in terms of communicating these things.
Mm-hmm.
Luckily for us at the St. Kitts and Nevis Met Services, we are actually going through a consultation where within the next 6 months, unfortunately, it's not in place at this moment. But within the next 6 months, we will have a dedicated website for the St. Kitts and Nevis Met Services.
That sounds good.
Yes.
Sounds very, very good. And it is
So,
needed.
yes. So, right now, what we are doing, we have mass communication. So, we have a mass email list, and all the media houses across St. Kitts and Nevis are on it. Quite a few of our stakeholders in terms of large institutions, whether it be central bank, Ross University, different government departments, are on our email list as well. So whenever we issue any advisory, yes, I will have the initial conversation with NEMA
Mm-hmm.
as well as government hierarchy first to alert them of the threat. Then shortly thereafter, once we push that information in the public domain, it goes out to everybody. So the same time you guys get it at Sugar City Rock, when FM gets it, and you guys now will help us disseminate it to the wider audience until we get our own website.
What
So
about,
we're happy to partner with you guys
of
for
course,
that.
and we're happy to do that too. Reciprocity. What happened to animals? Where are animal shelters? Where if I have 10 cattle out there and I really want them secure, where could I carry them? Because that is an
Yeah.
investment of people invest in livestock. Where could I take my animals to be sheltered during the don't tell me you're not dealing with animals because we're supposed to deal with animals. And we got Ross University down there too,
Yeah.
and they're helping us out considerably. How do we go about securing shelters for animals?
Little,
We reach a stage yet?
little when we make an investment, what we want to do in the behavior and the mindset is for you to also take into consideration the vulnerabilities and the profile of your area when it comes to risks. The risk profile is important. There is limited, and let me just, I'm being frank with you, there is limited capacity for animals,
Wow.
very limited capacity, even for dogs and cats, right? I know we have been working at the, I think there's a shelter just below NEMA in Limekeel. We have been, discussing to see how best, but my understanding that their space is extremely limited as well. The Ross University has very limited capacity when it comes to animals. So therefore, it means that the owners of these animals have to take a greater responsibility in ensuring that they create a pen and they create, the necessary facilities to be able to address these animals and this investment that they have made in animals.
Your shelter centers, can someone go there with a pet?
No, we don't encourage that, Nita. That's the reality. We are looking at shelters whereby we can have that capacity. It's an ongoing discussion. Hear me out. It's a very it's a very active discussion that we are having. How are we going to address pets? Because remember, the shelter is not just for you alone. We have persons who are going to be suffering from many issues, whether it be the sinuses issues, respiratory issues. We have had this discussion with the Ministry of Health. And one of the decisions that we have taken is we have to designate a particular shelter whereby animals, persons can go there with the animals and have that. We have had, as I said before, we have had the discussion with Ross University to see how much Ross can take. But the problem is, remember, they have their own residence,
Mm-hmm.
and their residence is over maybe 1,000 something students. And most of those students do have their own pets, so they have to accommodate those first, and then they can tell us now how much they can assist us with. So again, I'm appealing to persons who have their pets to be able to provide that support for their pets as well.
It is a high probability, or there is some degree of
Yes. Hmm.
probability that the hospital could become overwhelmed with respect to accommodation.
Oh yes.
At the center, would you have any medical staff, nursing staff at the centers to deal with persons who might have the inherent health issues?
Part of the whole shelter management scheme requires for security, requires health. So we normally partner with Red Cross, and we're on the Ministry of Health to have a nurse. In most instances, the hospital will tell you about we may not have sufficient manpower. But what they will do, according to the areas where they have the health facilities, they will be able to assign nurses to that particular district, right, for them. And that nurse will be assigned to or a liaison for the ministry for those particular shelters in that area. But to say that the nurse is going to be living there, that in itself may not be possible due to, human resource challenges.
Volunteerism give an atmosphere of free labor.
Yes.
Is there any time when you might have to contract persons
Wonderful question.
for pay?
Wonderful question. So the Prime Minister would have indicated that. So I brought that to his attention before, and he did agree with me that he did agree. As a matter of fact, he suggested, he said, Samuel, at some point, Mr. Samuel, at some point, we're going to have to contract their services. So that is something that he has given us the green light to do. If we have to contract someone's services so that we can have assurance of responsibility. Because as you said, a volunteer could just be in a shelter and think that he just walk off, he or she walks off because he said, hey, listen, no,
No contractual
right, no,
arrangement.
not made nothing in this for
Hmm.
me. You understand? And everybody gonna have that patriotic spirit. But we now have been given that flexibility to be able to contract those services of individuals for a short period of time to provide that support, and then the state will continue from there.
You mentioned very early that you have 14 persons working in NEMA.
Yes.
Is that due to budgetary constraint or lack of interest, lack of person with the prerequisite? Which category are all of the above?
None of the above, right?
None.
None of the above.
So you got the money,
No, is the structure. This is
is
the
the
structure.
structure.
The structure, because you see, NEMA wasn't well. Most of my colleagues throughout the region, you will find that they don't have this vast amount of persons, because here's the reality: NEMA works based on the public sector branches and arms. So, for example, anything to do with infrastructure, we know that the public works is public infrastructure will be responsible for that, because we don't have that expertise. I don't have engineers and so on in the agency. We use the government resources. So the state resources become our resources to be able to function and carry out our responsibilities. So that's why we have, so there are specific roles there that, we have to have technical persons in those capacities to function. So when I say 14, we have 14 persons that liaison with the public sector and private sector partnership to be able to support our population.
Even if you ain't paying me, feed me. Is there provision for those persons to be fed while exercising the duties?
Definitely, definitely. As a matter of fact, just a while ago, I had a great conversation with the peers of education, because one of the things that we want to do is use the facilities of the school meals
Mm-hmm.
to be able to provide support. And that was very instrumental during COVID. They were the ones who were actually cooking good food. So it's not like how people, listen, Nital, I had good nourishment person, and I'm a funny eater, just like you, right? I'm a funny eater,
Yes.
and they were able to sustain us all throughout the process, right? So there's a particular generator that we had in the warehouse, and I'm trying to see how best we can get it facilitated for them, so that they can be in a state of readiness as well to provide that support, not only to the persons operating, but there are children who are going to need that meal as well. So the Prime Minister has asked us to give prioritization to ensuring that that is in a state of readiness as well.
Elmo, your department, is it properly manned? You feel like there's still room for maybe one or two more persons of parallel capacity so that I know you're king of this thing. And you want to share no come with nobody.
Well,
Yes,
remember,
they come to fellas in Trinidad at one time. So them came king. But is there the capacity for that? And I teach it and I could tell somebody, look, that's a good area. What about the marketability? When you specialize in a particular, and that is what I feel the country should have. They should have a website where persons would be most marketable if they take up certain courses. We don't have anything to guide people. Everybody want to go with all the business, study that.
yeah.
And then we come back, people can't get work, and everybody frustrated. They blame the government change, same thing happen over and over and over. Now, do you think that there's a capacity for parallel knowledge in your department?
Well, I would say yes, we do have that already in place. So I am not irreplaceable. So I
Mm-hmm.
don't have to
About
have.
supplemental?
So supplementally, yes. So
Mm-hmm.
we have persons who have that level of competence in our office at the moment, and at the same time, what I'm trying to do is the current staff
Mm-hmm.
is to build the competence and build their capacity to bring them up
In-house
in
training?
in-house as well as regional training.
Regional? Okay,
So
excellent,
we are doing
excellent.
a lot of collaboration in terms of with the WMO, with the National Hurricane Center, because they do a lot of capacity building across the region, and we participate in a lot of these activities. So, but specifically in terms of advanced training in meteorology, as I indicated earlier, we do have two of us currently who are
Mm-hmm.
meteorologists in
Mm-hmm.
country, and I have been actively encouraging the younger ones, because the older ones who would have been there for quite some time, sad to say at times, are a bit comfortable with where they are. They would do the norm. So the younger ones are more impressionable. So
Mm-hmm.
those are the ones who are now showing up the interest in terms of going further. So we have quite a few persons, they have the requisite background, and we are looking to see how best we could support them in terms of I'm trying to mobilize as much funding because that is one of the main concern at times, funding for a lot of these trainings and so forth. So we do in that internally. Currently, we have three additional staff members who are overseas who will be bringing up our capacity in house. So the staff numbers is going to increase. And as you increase the basic numbers, then you could have a lot more upward mobility and
Specialization. Hmm.
specialization because we do recognize more and more, although we are not mandated in terms of we don't have a legislation governing the Met Service at this moment. What we have been doing over the years, our mandate, as much as it has been informal, it has been evolving. So as the needs arise, more and more is being asked of the Met Service. So traditionally, we were there for aviation purposes. Now we are providing a lot of support to climate services. We're providing a lot of climate information to the various climate sensitive sectors as well. So you find more and more is being asked of the Met Service. At the same time, when you look at it from even from a technological point of view, the traditional equipment that we used to use is becoming obsolete. So you're finding a lot of the staff now are now considering going into electronics because a lot of our equipment is electronic as well as computerized. So all of these things, so there's quite a bit of opportunity for persons, especially in the high school as well as the college level,
Hmm.
to not just look at the traditional avenue of potential work. You know, as I said, most persons usually try to become whether a doctor, lawyer, Indian chief. So we used to speak. But there's opportunities, a lot of opportunities out there right now. And this, I will take this opportunity to encourage
Just
persons
about to tell you to
um,
that.
get into science. If you're passionate about science, there are opportunities in meteorology. At the same time, bearing in mind, meteorology is extremely heavy when it comes to maths. So get a strong foundation when it comes to your mathematics. I was lucky that I had a passion for all the sciences as well as maths. It was an easy transition for me. So I'm encouraging persons, if you're interested in meteorology, especially if you're interested in aviation, start to get involved with your sciences at the earliest possible um, point, as well as mathematics, because that is where the foundation is gonna be.
Um, Mr. Samuel,
Yes, sir.
do you have regular meetings with the Ministry of Finance? Some people say money is no problem, but the problem is no money. And money is the thing that makes the mayor go, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes we feel don't care how much we are given, more is still needed. How do you establish how much is sufficient? Because sometimes for you to establish sufficient, you got to shortcut yourself and say, I'm going to make do with this, you know. You got to become complacent. But
Yeah.
once the money is not coming, you start to doctor yourself to fall within a budget. Do you think that your collaboration with the finance, Ministry of Finance, is at the level that it ought to be? Because I'm sensing there's always the lack of sufficient financing.
Yes.
I mean, you could
No,
whisper it loudly.
no, of course, the risk financing and in preparedness. I can say this to you, Nitel, and the Republic, that I would have, I would have submitted uh, with the previous administration. I would have submitted a readiness budget. What this would have done for me, okay, is that it would have given me that cushion to be able to support all the other agencies and also carry out my functions. Let me tell you this: in national security, I have the smallest budget with the largest
I
responsibility.
just about to say that. I just about to
Okay,
finish the sentence for
with
you,
the
you know.
largest responsibility. And I just echoed this. We had a heads of national security meeting last Monday, and I echoed the same sentiments. And my dependency is the public works, the social services, and all the other government agencies to make sure that they have that supporting budget to carry out the functions that we need. There's two particular budgets I request, that readiness budget, and I asked for $1.5 million.
It's a readiness, is it mobilization?
It's two things. That readiness budget will help me to prepare to,
Mm-hmm.
or for, and respond to the
Okay.
impacts.
Mm-hmm.
So it has a twofold approach to it.
Mm-hmm.
So little but that particular submission was struck down twice, right? Um,
And
or
replaced by what?
by nothing, right?
Serious?
Regular budget. The reality is my function has been more on the donor partners who have been supporting me. So I have a great relationship with my donor partners.
Mm.
However, what is important for the public to understand is that donor partner support has also dwindled. Dwindled why?
Local, regional,
International,
international.
because of the economic profile of St. Kitts and Nevis. Our economic profile is that of a developed state
Yes.
and not a developing
So we
state.
think we need to put it back where it was before.
I don't think
Because
so.
that has created some problems.
Some serious
Some
problems
grants and so we do not get.
we do not get.
Because we have transitioned into a higher state of economic
Economic
status.
status.
What do we do? How do we fight that?
And well, I know the Prime Minister of Barbados, Mia Motley, would have actually made some strong appeals when it comes to that,
Mhm.
right? I'm hoping that our leaders at CARICOM are able to influence the World Bank, because they are the ones who do that profiling, right? And so when persons look at that World Bank profile, then donors will tell me straightforward, Abdias, I could give you 10,000, or you cannot access the 75,000 and the 100,000 because of your profile. So that has dwindled significantly. We're going to have to look at re-strategizing the funding and financing for disaster risk management, because with what is happening with climate change, with the warming, that global warming, rising in sea levels, we're going to see the intensification of storm, the issue of drought, which we are not, the heat waves that we are experiencing, the high temperatures, and many other things that are going to impact every single economic driver in our society.
Might have to
Huh?
go and we can restructure, retrofit the schools
And the
with
schools,
more windows and so people don't
windows,
take in from heat
of course,
exhaustion and so.
right? Because
So that's all.
the AC is not going to be the answer for it, right? So we're going to have to move into those smart schools, making schools, more environmentally smarter and habitable for children in particular. So little the financing will always be an issue globally. It's not just a single
Yeah,
serious
yeah, I
issue.
understand.
It's an issue globally, and we're going to have to look at how do we restructure. So we do have consultation with the Ministry of Finance, when we're going into budget estimates. But now that the NEMA board has been established, I'm hoping that we can get more attention towards the financing for the agency, because my understanding is that there's going to be the potential move to take NEMA to a statutory agency or body, as opposed to leaving it as a government department as
You
it
think
is
that
right
would
now.
be better? The better
I think so.
option?
I
But
think
a
so.
lot of statutory bodies on here not doing so well.
Yeah, but I think so, Nital. As a matter of
You
fact,
got more
Bahamas.
control over your
That's
finance.
it. Yeah,
Yeah,
Bahamas did
more
that.
control over that. But what about generating the finance in the
Well,
first place?
well,
How NEMA is going to generate its
yeah,
finance?
that's a good
Solid waste
question.
could generate it. You
Yeah,
pick up
but
the garbage, you pay for
yeah,
a dumpster, you pay for that.
we're
But
gonna have to find ways.
what are your assets to generate
Yeah,
when you got as a statutory body?
right. Well, Bahamas is doing that. They move from a government body to an authority now.
Mhm.
They move that. Grenada just passed the act. They are moving in that
What
direction.
function they carry out to
Right.
generate
Well,
revenue?
no, it's gonna be heavily subsidized by government. Right. That's the reality.
But you could write your own application for
Nations.
grants and those
Correct.
access
Yes.
international
So
agencies.
so
Mhm.
my grants may not have to be managed by the Ministry of Finance, but we would be able to manage those grants in a quicker time period and be able to implement programs in a more faster way than having to go through those bureaucracies of purchase orders, having a number of things where it
Much red
delays.
tape, you're looking for red carpet.
Exactly.
No, seriously, it could
No,
be
I mean,
frustrating.
it is
Could be
frustrating. It can be.
frustrating.
It can be.
And I understand But I hope that that
Yeah.
equilibrium could be well thought out,
Yes. Agree.
because some of them they really struggle. We got some statutory corporation they make a penny in profit for the past 10 years.
Yes. Agree.
For the
Agree.
past 10 years, and workers become frustrated because they put in the work and they cannot see the proportionate remuneration,
Yes.
and that
Yeah.
is where the problem may be. Before
Yeah.
you understand,
No.
it's
Agree.
tight,
Agree.
and we have to discuss it.
Because the question is, Nital, we have been speaking about Sinkits, but we also have Nevis, which we as the federal agency, NEMA, we're
Responsible for as
responsible
well.
for. But here's this: we are responsible from the federal approach, but there is no regulation mandating the Nevis end to actually report. What we have is a cordial relationship.
Mm.
So there is no regulatory, how to say, obligation,
Mm-hmm.
right, to the office. It's mainly a cordial relationship. And what I think, if we move to that statutory and there is political will, we will be able to bring everything under one umbrella. So there is more influence, there is more of a mandatory type of action required out of Nevis. I cannot mandate anything from the office of Nevis. Okay? I can actually request of them to give me support and collaborate.
So when Sync has become a republic and Nevis goes as a republic, what's gonna happen to the statutory body?
Well, I guess reconstruction we have to do that. Right? You
We
got
can
we got
figure.
reconfiguration. Sorry, well, reconstruction
Yeah,
and
we can figure it.
reconfiguration. Nital, just before we move,
Yes,
I
yes.
have my colleague in Grenada who has been listening to us and sending
Mm.
me a message. It's a colleague, Cecil Mitchell. Cecil, big up to you. We know you're listening and you're watching. You said good job. So with Nital, you always have to expect that. He's a scientist by nature. Okay.
Yeah, thanks much.
Yes.
Now we have just about 5 to 10 minutes,
Yeah.
and I would let you all continue stealing the show.
Elmo,
I
I
might
know.
be an apprentice. Just give your partner word.
Yes, yeah,
Encourage
yeah,
is
Well,
yours.
yes,
well, from the Met Service end, what
Mm-hmm.
I would like to encourage the general public, recognizing the potential hyperactive season that we are facing, the time to prepare is now. Start your preparation now. We are not saying that we will be impacted, but because of all that cyclonic activity that will be out there, the chances are we may be impacted. And we're asking, we're begging the general public, let's not wait, because as Mr. Samuel would have said earlier, we have developed a complacent attitude right now because a lot of time persons will say, oh, the Met Office get it wrong because the storms miss us, they skirt us by and whatever. But if we don't prepare and we get a major impact, because I remember, I can't remember what year it was, it might have been 2015 or so. Dominica wasn't preparing for Tropical Storm Erica.
yes.
We were in full preparation here in St. Kitts for Erica. And that particular night, Erica dipped and went south, caught Dominica off guard. And the financial loss to Dominica was significant. So, what we are asking persons, if you build your resilience, be prepared. We are hoping that if we are impacted, we can rebound in a short time.
Elmo, I know you're being diplomatically correct, but this ain't no time for no diplomacy right
Tell
now.
it wrong.
Respectfully, okay? This is the reality. We are facing the barrel of something that is unprecedented. This is no time. Again, let me repeat. This is no time for us to waste time with complacency, with issues, whether Met get it right, Met get it wrong, whether Mr. Samuel right and Mr. Samuel wrong. This is beyond you and I. This is time where we need to be prepared. This is time where every single person need to do what they need to do to ensure that one, they get the message. Two, they implement their plans. They look at how they're gonna get themselves ready. Three, how are they going to respond when we say it's coming, it's coming. Four, we want to avoid any kind of panic, but rather that the information is shared from us in a timely manner, that the state in itself has the necessary resources available, especially the essentials for people, right? The state has that, but the people themselves share the responsibility with the state in terms of their readiness. I shouldn't wait and you or me or Nita to come and say, get a bottle of water. We live in a geographical vulnerable
Vulnerable.
area. We know that we are susceptible to these things. Let's be ready. General public, listeners, followers of Sugar City FM 90.3, I'm going to hold ranking and Nittle to it that every day they need to reassure you that they're doing everything to make sure that they continue to educate you to prepare for this season. Nittle, I was asked earlier, how do I feel? I'm be honest with you. This is one of the first time in my 24 years in government that I am now concerned about a hurricane season. Okay? Religiously or otherwise, you ask, but divine intervention is one thing. The reality and the ground is another. Let's get ready, people. Let's be ready. I want to give you the assurance, and I hate using the I word, that we are going to push as much as we can. It's nothing perfect to get you ready and get the country ready. But you have to do your part. Our regional and international partners are listening and they are ready to support. You have to be ready. We cannot become a social state that we are just depending on people to assist us. Let us bind together and be ready. So thank you, Nital. Thank you, Sugar City FM. Rankin, I'm going to be calling you now and again to make sure that you join hands with NEMA. I'm going to be calling on Nital as well, okay? For that, Nital could give us that support as well. And Nital, you have to start with, I want you to have the messaging for us is the behavioral change, the mindset change. This is where I want your support. I don't want anything else. That's the support around, because if you change mindsets, everything then will flow. Thank you very much for having us.
Well, I cannot add anything to that without diluting the sum and substance of the message. So I'll put an end to the program and thank Mr. Samuel and Mr. Bob for being here on such an informative and instructive as well program. Thank you for producing the flexibility in having them come here spontaneously. Because it was just yesterday.
Yes.
I begged of them to produce a flexibility and come. So we want to really thank Sugar City for affording us that flexibility. Thank you.
A short notice is always better, don't worry. And just to let you guys know, doors is open anytime you guys call on us. And any bulletins, yeah, please send it to us. We will put it out there. All right. Time check in the studio is 12 minutes moving up to 4 o'clock. We're going to take a break, and when we come back, we continue the vibes.
The Caribbean is the all-new 90.3.
Are you tired of Wi-Fi dead zones in your home? The Cable has the ultimate solution with our whole home Wi-Fi coverage. Say goodbye to frustrating signal drops and hello to seamless connectivity in every corner of your home. No more
Mom, my tablet's not working in my bedroom. My game is freezing, Daddy.
or WhatsApp calls dropping as you walk around the house. So many people struggle with dead zones and restricted Wi-Fi, and the Cable has the answer. Enjoy